my name is Niki Okuk. Well, first of all, thank you for having us. Thank you, I really appreciate this. My name is Niki Okuk. A few years ago, I started a tire recycling company. And so I'd like to talk to you guys a little bit about that, why I did that and how that went and how it's going. And now we're also looking at converting it to a worker cooperative. So I'd like to talk with all of you about that as well today. And just thank you so much for having us, because honestly, being an entrepreneur, a small business owner, and working there, you know, we tend to get really bogged down in the day-to-day minutia of like stacking the tires and doing the invoicing, and it takes us away from these conversations, this sort of larger, like sort of academic or intellectual framework that does motivate our work, right? Like we do want to believe that RCO is some step on a march to some greater, more lofty ideal. So it's only in these contexts that I think we get to have those conversations, and I appreciate you guys for offering that. Thank you.
Alright, hello guys, my name is Bryan. I'm an author and an artist, a graffiti artist at that. I work at RCO Tires. I've been there since almost the beginning. What I'm about is just equality for everybody, and trying to find an end to capitalism and better sustainable ways of living. Thank you for having me, and you guys look very beautiful and handsome.
And you do too.
That's for you guys.
So RCO, well, let me start a little bit before that. I went to school to study economics. I thought I was going to work in development. I worked for Joseph Stiglitz, who's pretty dope. And but I think for a lot of people, if anybody's worked in development, you understand that you sort of recognize some hypocrisies in it, how it actually does serve imperialist, neo-colonial endeavors. So I went away from that. The big banks were heavily recruiting. I went and worked in finance and investment banking for a little bit. Of course, that's soul-sucking, especially because I grew up as a social activist. My mother came to speak here before. She raised me, as she would call it, a red diaper baby. She told me when I was studying economics that I was just studying like a neoliberal plot to brainwash me into believing. She told me this. I'm like 17 years old, going off freshman in college, and she's like, no, Niki. And sure enough, she was right, because mamas are like always right. And so both of those things, you know, were very problematic. They came up against all the principles that I had been raised under. And in the process of doing an MBA, I got to do a segment of it at MIT where they have this sustainability program. And there's this guy there, they call him Dr. Doom, Professor Doom, and he creates the climate change models that are essentially used like at the UN and in most of the climate negotiations and things like that. They're large, they're complicated, they have lots of feedback loops, it's very overwhelming. But the conclusion of which is, you know, he's working very hard to convince world leaders that they need to take action on climate change, finding that to be incredibly difficult despite having a great deal of empirical evidence and science backing him up. So he thought that the next step for him would be to then go into the business schools and to be speaking to the next generation of corporate leadership, right? So that's how he ends up in a class at MIT, Sloan, teaching folks like me that are supposed to go off and be like CEOs. A lot of my colleagues did. They went off to be executives at big companies. And some of them, you know, they do environmental impact work that I think probably has a large impact. You know, if you go to Charmin and you increase the amount of recyclable material that's used in their product, you make a big impact, right? One of our case studies was Walmart. Walmart's way that they changed their fishing. It has a big impact. I decided not to do that. I decided, oh, great, I'm gonna go and start my own business for no reason. And I thought I wanted to be a green business, and I wanted to be at home in my hood in LA making jobs where I grew up. So I looked at a couple different things. I was thinking about plastics recycling or oil recycling or battery recycling, and tires ended up being the one. This is the biggest tire market in the world. So what does RCO do? We started out with, Ryan remembers, we started out with like a rented truck in like this really crappy little warehouse in Hawthorne. And we were picking up tires from all the tire shops and the recap shops and taking them to another big recycler. There's 2 or 3 big recyclers They're the ones that have the multi-million-dollar equipment that grinds up tires into all the asphalt and the playground surfaces and stuff like that. I didn't have $2 million. I had my credit card and my mom's credit card, and I, like enough credit to get like a very, very small loan, like a $10,000 loan. But nobody was gonna give me a $2 million loan. It was never, ever gonna happen. So we had to figure out other stuff. We've since figured out how to make a few different things. We make bumpers that are used at loading docks where trucks back up to buildings. Those bumpers that are there probably come from RCO. Also the big bumpers that are on like steamships and tugboats. And if you've ever seen those orange traffic barrels that have the black tire ring on the bottom, we make those, a lot of those, like dozens of truckloads per month. They're also shipped into the agricultural industry. They use them for weights on silage tarps, if anybody knows what that means.
Weights
And
on what?
silage tarps,
Okay.
farmers ferment their feed and they cover it with huge tarps. It goes for acres and acres and acres. Weighting down those tarps, they use a lattice of rubber rings. Anyways, I found most all of these products like on Google. Not really serious, right? That was like my business research, like made from tires, and then just scrolling through pictures. So that, that kind of sums up too, like, entrepreneurialism, right? And why we're here talking about worker cooperatives. And the first time that people came to me and was talking about worker cooperatives, I was like, yeah, well, good luck with that. Nobody wants to be an entrepreneur to start with, right? Because it's super, super risky. It's so scary. There's not a lot of return on it. Sometimes you're totally shooting from the hip. Like the only reason I was able to do it because I could sleep on my grandmother's couch and drive my mom's minivan, and I don't have any kids to take care of, right? Like I had a series of privileges that allowed me to do something. But if somebody's got family and kids, like it's super hard to think about doing something like starting your own business, much less, then think about, well, let's do it as a cooperative. Let's not only do something I have no idea how to do it, let's do it in a way that nobody else knows how to do it either. And so we started out just as a regular company. I incorporated it. I'm the president and secretary and treasurer, and I own everything, right? I own everything.
And all the risk.
Yeah, and all the risk. But so the company's grown well. It's grown, by all business metrics. I think we've grown very well. The first year in business, we probably did about $100,000 in revenue. Last year, we did $1 million, and that's in 4 years. But we also spend about $1 million a year, right? So between paying our rent, workers' comp, our payroll, we now employ 13 to 15 people, depending, to cover our payroll and our insurance and our cost of supplies and fuel and trucking, everything like that. We're pretty much a break-even company, right? So despite all the investments and the debt that I've now gotten myself into, we now have a business that doesn't really have a profit. Even less than having a profit, I haven't even really paid myself in quite a while. This is gonna be the year though. I'm gonna get a salary this year. Like that's me speaking it into existence. And therein, sort of, we arrive at the heart of this conversation about profit-driven businesses versus cooperatively driven businesses. Because under a capitalist model, there's no reason for RCO to exist. There's no reason why an investor would invest the money not to get a return, not to have a profit, right? So there's no motive to create companies like RCO. However, we know as a community that there's lots of good reasons for RCO to exist, right? We've diverted something like 300 million pounds of rubber from landfills into new products. That's 70 million gallons of oil that aren't going to waste, that are now as a new product. And we employ 13 people now. Over the course of the 4.5, 5 years we've been in business though, more than 30 people have come to work at RCO and gotten their lives together. Sorry, I'm gonna cry. I always cry at this point. People have gone from being houseless to having homes. People have been able to get their kids back out of the system because they were able to stabilize their life. They've gone on to other jobs, maybe higher paying jobs at other places, right? So we do not discriminate against the formerly incarcerated. It was never even a question for me because I grew up in South LA and everybody I know is a felon. But also, right? It's a launching pad for other things, right? And like Brian wants to go and start his own business. There's other people that are going to go and do other things, hopefully after RCO. So there's a lot of good reasons, right, why RCO should exist and continue to exist. Unfortunately, making profit is just not one of them. And so when my when my mom and her colleagues were first talking to me about like, oh, you guys should make RCO into a worker cooperative, conceptually I was 100% behind it. I'm like, yeah, that's great. We should do that. That's, you know, I'll sell the company to the guys. They'll run it for perpetuity, and I can go on and do other things, right? Which one of them is creating the organization Lucy, which I saw a flyer floating around for it, and Lucy is intended to be an incubator for more worker cooperatives, right? So hopefully we can take our experience from RCO and create more worker cooperatives. But my other question, you know, the great fear that I think comes up in me all the time is, you know, well, it doesn't make a lot of money. If they're just at break even, are they going to make it? You know, when they hit hard times, what are they going to do? How are they going to survive? It's really hard for worker cooperatives to get loans because it's not a business type that is on the checkbox list for the loan application. It's like S Corp, C Corp, LLC, worker cooperative. What is that? Why do you have 23 partners? Who's your managing director? Who's the president? It's like, it's complicated. So part of our mission, I think, as a community that wants to foster worker cooperatives is finding solutions for that, right? We need to figure out how to create the financial tools to get the resources to the worker cooperatives so that we can survive. Because it's really hard to survive as an entrepreneur, period. Most small businesses fail. However, it's been empirically proven, statistically studied and proven that worker cooperatives actually survive more at a higher rate, more often, and last longer. So we're not making a bad investment. Actually making a very sound investment, just nobody knows how to make the investment yet because the loans don't exist yet until we make them. That's the other part that's super scary about our conversion plans. You know, I've been meeting with the guys, we've been talking about it, we want to start training on it, but there's not a lot of people out there for us to learn from. You know, we can study Arizmendi and watch the videos from Arizmendi, we can watch the movie The Take, but it's so hard to do something that you've never seen before, right? Like it's hard enough to start a business when you already have the business model, right? When somebody says, oh, here's how you start a 7-Eleven. You need this much money, you rent the space, you buy the inventory, this is what you should pay your workers, go, right? That's a model that's been tried and tested and is fairly easy to replicate, but it still fails all the time. We're talking about doing it and nobody knows how to do it yet. And I think that's why, even though we're not actually converting yet, we still get called out and asked to talk about it because there's not a lot of other people doing it. And I try to tell the guys at work, like, we have to imagine that we're at the forefront of something and that our experience and what we learn from this is going to foster other businesses to do it in the future, because like we can't all fly to Spain. Like I'd like for all of us to just take a big field trip to Mondragon and go to school there and learn how to do it, but we can't because we have to stack tires and cut tires and sell tires every day just to keep food on the table. So if anybody wants to give us a scholarship to do that,
The funding page.
Yeah. Yes, please interrupt with questions because I could talk about RCO forever.
A solution came to mind, which is that it becomes cooperative with a required reinvestment of, say, 2% by each member. That's part of the deal. Is you want to come in on this, then, with food co-ops, you donate your time, but that there's actually part of your paycheck that goes back into the growth of the company, and that's part of the deal. So you're the one who's good at the math and the numbers. So, that you figure out what that baseline is, and as the company grows, it will be easier to bring in new members and have that growth process. And I think that it's not such a hard bargain to offer that when you are rehabilitating communities and people who have nothing to lose and everything to gain and have subsisted on even less.
Yeah, that's definitely, we've talked about the way to finance it. There's actually a great organization called Concerned Capital. There's also the Working World. I think you guys probably know both of those. And they would underwrite the deal, right? They would essentially say, RCO's worth whatever, $100,000, that the guys are now taking on that debt in their buyout, and then the company will pay that loan on a monthly basis. And yes, the guys would then earn their ownership through either hours or some portion of their paycheck. it's difficult to explain these things though to people who have never thought about buying a company or owning a company. Maybe you can speak to that, like the guys' reactions around it, because I think it's pretty varied.
Well, I talk about the worker co-op model with the guys and co-workers and never heard of it. It's very foreign to them. And they really don't believe in it and kind of doubt it because they never seen it manifest. They don't have anything, they never heard of it. So I'm trying to educate them in a language that they'll understand. Because I can give them the paperwork, I can give them the books, I can give them et cetera, but a lot of them don't know how to interpret it right and interpret it in different ways. So what we're focusing on right now is just working as a collective, working as a community and making decisions. And it's a slow process. Because not everyone gets along, not everyone wants to work together, everyone wants to do their own thing. So it's a challenge, yet it's a learning experience, and there's building blocks in place. So as we learn this, they're learning, and they're starting to trust it. They're starting to trust it little by little. And I think that's a way that's comfortable for people to learn this science, this system, and not moving too fast. But we're getting there, and they're starting to accept it little by little.
I'm thinking one way to get people to understand, especially in Compton being so ethnic and racial ethnic diversity, is it seems to me that if we, like Africa and a lot of cultures there, that cooperative, and maybe there's a way to tie that, the whole concept of being a cooperative venture with many of our roots back in Africa or in other countries, or even Native American culture, where people worked on a cooperative basis, and had more of a commitment to community.
Yeah, and I think we're creating that. Sorry, did you? I think that's like part of the first building block for us towards this is we have to run our company in a way that honors the cooperative principles, right? Which are, I can't name them off the top of my head, but essentially like cooperation and mutual aid and things like that. So RCO is, we're committed to diversity, and people say that, but we do definitely try to hire all types of folks. And also we're very lenient when it comes to like family crises or just a couple days ago, one of the guys was like randomly stopped by a sheriff and he got, he had like an outstanding warrant from 7 or 8 years ago, and he got hauled in because he's black, to be honest. So the sheriff, I stood there and argued with the sheriff for I don't know how long, and I called down the sergeant and I'm like, you can't do this, we can't run our company without him, he's our lead machine operator, we all have to go back to work, like you're gonna shut us down right now by taking this guy on, you could cite him out right now, you could write him a ticket with a court date and he can go to court. I of course lost that battle, and the sheriff says, don't worry, he's gonna get out tomorrow morning, he's gonna go to court in the morning, he'll be out tomorrow morning. The next morning his wife calls me and says, oh, he got 3 months. So this is just doing business like in the era of Trump. I mean, it was true before Trump, not like Obama was a saint, but it's just, this is the world that we live in. So now this guy's sitting in jail, but RCO is putting money on his books, and the guys are going out there to visit him tomorrow at Wayside. And when he comes back, he'll have a job waiting for him. And we took some money over to his wife and made sure that she has some food. Like, there's all this other stuff. I gotta learn how to not cry at all this stuff, but it's deeply emotional though when you're there and you have to deal with this stuff all the time. So as far as like trying to create that community, that like cooperative like community, like I feel like that really, really is the first step. Because if you just treat it like it's a job, and then you're like, hey, buy your job, people are kind of like, oh, I don't know, why would I want to buy my job? Sounds like a lot of responsibility. Like, but when it's more than that, right? When it's more than a job, when it is your family and it's your community, then hopefully you begin to see the reason to want to do something like that. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I mean, to answer your question, people are starting to learn that dynamic that you're speaking of. It's slowly, but it's really slow. But like, you guys were talking about, you guys were having conversations earlier about different cultures. Some cultures are used to that kind of working together, and some are not. So, like she said, our lead machine operator was arrested, and we had to all come together to figure out like how we're gonna make it work. We had to come together on the floor and ask everybody who's gonna step up temporarily. And a lot of people were kind of hesitant, a lot of people were kind of scared, but we all came together and we made a decision to keep going, even though we're a shorter person. And that was very moving and very powerful, because you don't usually see that in a workplace where we make decisions together as a collective.
Brian? Is Brian right?
Yes.
Yeah, hi, thank you. So, but in a sense, that should be like, that's exactly what you guys are talking about, right? Like that, those kind of crises that bring you all together are the glue that strengthens you all in the end, right? So they see how you're all bonding together, all you guys are jumping in together and saying, we're a team. And so how do you, could you talk a little bit about, since I'm a newbie on this thing, like how you deal with like pay structure? I mean, like is it a completely transparent thing? Does it, you know what I'm saying? Like kind of just the nitty gritty of the details, and also if you would step back and say how you kind of found out about, you said you feel like you're just doing this and you're kind of out there in the woods. Like, isn't the group in Spain, like, aren't there kind of guidelines and things you can use for answering to that kind of stuff? Or is this, it's a whole new kind of... Sorry, it's a lot of questions.
No, it's two really good questions, so I want to make sure that I hit both of them. So when I first started the company, the guy that was the general like manager and supervisor is a guy that I worked with before, and he was not very interested in the worker co-op model, not very interested in democracy at work, was kind of just like, whatever, I just want to get paid, like I just want to make some money. But what that also meant though is like it ran counter to so many of the things that I was trying to create there, right? Like, just like he was very disrespectful to the workers, right? Like very much in that like boss mode, like I'm the boss, I get to talk to you however I want, and like I'm the boss, and like I get paid whatever I want, and it's none of your business, and I was like, that's not really gonna work here, that's not what this company is about. So eventually, yeah, like we did have to part ways. So I think like finding people that are on that mental path with you, which is very much to do with culture. So my father's from Papua New Guinea. Papua New Guinea, like in our village, like everything is done collectively. All of the land distribution decisions are made in a completely like horizontal collective fashion. Tribal court is held in the same way. It's like it takes a really long time, and it's really exhausting, and it's super super thorough, and it's like all the things that you imagine to be dysfunctional. When I went home, I'm sitting there, whatever, 15, 16 years old from the US, and I'm like, why does everything take so long? Like, why is everything so complicated? Now I learned to appreciate it, and it is part of the thinking, I think, that brought me to this, right? That would allow me to open a company and then be very transparent with all the workers about, like, this is what I get, well, I get paid zero, but whatever. This is what the manager gets paid. This is what the foreman gets paid. This is what the driver gets paid. So part of the principles for starting a cooperative are definitely that, yes, all of the pay has to be very transparent. It doesn't really work unless you do that. So one of our first steps to moving towards cooperativizing was to unionize. So last year we became proud members of the United Steelworkers, Local 675. And United Steelworkers is the union that has the memorandum of understanding with Mondragon. So United Steelworkers has a vision for a cooperative economy that they're trying to manifest with Mondragon. And so the guy at USW and the folks from Mondragon are also with me on the board for Lucy, right? So there's a lot of intersections here in that we all have the same ambition. It's just that Mondragon, the cooperative endeavors so far back east, especially in like Cincinnati and Cleveland and stuff like that, have been mostly in the service sector. So they've been things like laundry, restaurants. I think we're gonna be the first manufacturing one when we do it. So I hope all of you follow us on this journey to help us, get through it, and then hopefully also like learn from it, and then like retell the story, right? So that other people can learn how to do the process too, as we figure it out. do we have resources from them? I have only ever met one person who I know is like directly affiliated with Mondragon, and that would be Michael Peck through the One Worker, One Vote organization. But they're all based back east, which is great because they have those resources and it's useful to do phone calls. When you're a small business owner though, and you're really just trying to get to like through the day to day of like making sure that the rent is paid and stuff like that, it would be so much more useful to me if I had an example here in LA, if I had somebody that I could like talk to or have come to my warehouse and talk about how we structure ourselves and how do we run the company. So part of our transition process will be bringing people from back east or possibly from Europe or other places in the world to come and talk to us about it. Because right now in Los Angeles, unless there's someone out there listening to this, please call me. Right now in Los Angeles, as far as I know, we're the only one. It's just us. So I hope that we are the seed.
I was gonna say a couple of things. I mean, one, I think the passion that you show is actually the beauty of what you're doing. I mean, I wish CEOs would cry, you know? I mean, because it shows a caring that is gotta feel throughout the company. And you gotta have I'm learning about worker co-ops. When you think about it, they're cooperative ownership in apartment type housing and stuff like that, so it's not. There are some, I've seen co-ops in agriculture. The big agricultural producers form co-ops to sell their stuff. And it seems to me that when you start a co-op, there's what I'll call the distinction between the ownership and just the operations, that you've got strategic business issues to make more money or generate more revenue, maybe more efficient, that are separate than the ownership structure. That a cooperative ownership means that all the workers participate in the ownership. And ownership, whether it's capitalist structure, shareholders are separate. The ownership function is different than running the day-to-day, i.e. they have their labor. That's the running of the business. And it seems to me that what I'm hearing, and this seems to be true whether it's somebody's acquiring a company or somebody's an ESOP, employee stock ownership, that before you go out and do it, there's this teaching, this cultural change that has to take place. And you're in South Los Angeles. I spent a lot of time, that's my focus in business, South Los Angeles business. Yes, you're talking to people, and this is true of all communities. We say, well, I want to own a business. As you said, most people don't want to be entrepreneurs. They don't want that. Now you're saying business ownership. And so there's a whole education that has to go on right now before you. Those series of conversations that, well, this is what we mean by cooperative, and it may be like capitalist businesses. Sometimes they define their culture differently. I think we were just talking about ethics in business. Well, cooperative businesses may have a certain standard, but your company may have additional. And I'm curious because I'm working right now in a company in South Los Angeles, and I've talked to the people about converting them to a worker cooperative. But I absolutely want to keep in touch with what you're doing and see. I have to catch up. But it seems to me that education and teaching, and I tested this over this past week, just informally at a couple things I went to. And most of the people were from South Los Angeles, and all were just, yes, I like it. They liked the ring of it, but I could tell that there was an education to what does it mean? What does this mean to me? What is the difference between my being an employee where I can just go home or be part of a cooperative, and what's the value in that? And many of your stories start to speak of the value. You go work there, and they may not care what happens to you after 5 o'clock. We do, because we're part of a community. And that decision making, that part, I mean, you're sort of getting at it. I like the transparency in pay. That actually works best in capitalist structures too. People are less animosity, more open and more transparent. But there's other things, like you said, the decision making, how can you make it efficient within the cooperative model, things like that. And does everybody have an opinion on everything? That type of
It was funny when we first unionized. Of course, everybody feels bold and empowered, and it also it sort of happened against the backdrop of the really crappy manager guy leaving. So everybody was feeling great. They're like, great, we got that horrible guy for back, and now we're unionized. But most people today don't grow up in union families, don't know anybody with union jobs, or have never had a union job, so they weren't even really sure what it meant to be a union member. So I think the first thing they went through their head is like, oh, well now we're in charge of ourselves. And it was kind of funny because it was like, there was some conflict on the floor. I forget, somebody was saying like, oh, we should unload this trailer, and somebody else was saying, no, we should all be cutting tires. And I went out there and I was like, no, I need you guys to cut tires right now. Because as you said, sometimes the person who's in the leadership position has a little bit more information. I happen to know that a truck was coming to pick up a load, right? They didn't know that, I knew that. So I said, no, you guys need to be doing this thing. And the guys like almost went, it was like a mutiny. They were like, but Niki, but no, what about the rules? I'm like, what rules? I'm the boss, go. Like, now that's not what we want, right? That's not the type of cooperative environment we're trying to create. But I'm just saying there are like real learning hurdles trying to figure out like, okay, well, who is making decisions, because who has the most up-to-date and relevant information to be making those decisions. So the way that I describe it to the guys is I say, you know, when you guys take over the company, you will be the boss. However, you're still going to want to hire someone to do the things that I do, right? Which is new product development, or going out to meet with customers and trying to get new customers, and, you know, coordinating our logistics of when orders are going out and when supplies are coming in. You're going to want to hire somebody to do that job. It doesn't have to be me. It'll be up to you guys. You guys can fire me, or you guys can hire me, or maybe I'll quit. But I'm trying to frame it to them like that. Like, they're still going to have a person that does that coordination stuff, and it'll be up to them to choose who that person is, and then supervise them and make sure that that person's doing a good job. Because sometimes I make mistakes, right? Like, I've like made mistakes on payroll, or Brian knows this happens all the time. I tell a truck, yeah, come in, the product's ready, product's not ready. Right? Like, I totally make mistakes, and it's their job then to supervise me or whoever's in my role and decide like, oh, are they totally messing up? We should fire them. Or are they doing a good job? You know, we should keep them on. But that is going to be a totally new and learning process, because there's not another company that we can look to ask those questions to right now. Yes.
In that context, I mean, if you're cooperative and unionized, is firing the go-to answer in that context? Just since.
Yeah, and I guess in a union context, if I'm the manager, right, then I guess I probably wouldn't be part of the unit, so they could fire me at any time. But yeah, I think
But
generally you
what's
don't
the
want
owner?
to.
If you're the owner, if in a co-op, if everyone's an owner, I don't know how the union fits into that.
Yeah, these are all great questions. Questions I have.
Yeah, but you know, I didn't mean to butt in anyone's time, but you know, but I would like to keep in touch with both of you. I have a legal background. In fact, my first job in California was working, as I told you, in the Compton legal office. And I've worked several years with legal services. I have a bar card, and I'm told the only good thing that's for is seeing people in jail, so keep that in mind.
Oh, yes. I really need that.
But, you know, but what I'm curious about is that I know a lot of people who work with nonprofits, a lot of progressive pro bono organizations. Is there anything here in Southern California that could help train, let's say, attorneys and other people who are kind of interested, especially those who work with nonprofits, to be trained in this whole thing about
cooperative model?
Yeah, as a cooperative model, because I think I could find folks who might be interested in learning.
National Lawyers Guild.
Yeah, National Lawyers Guild. Yeah.
I mean, that's the overarching ambition for Lucy, right? So Lucy is the Los Angeles Union Cooperative Initiative, but what we envision ourselves as like a business services for cooperatives. So within our ranks, we would like to have lawyers who understand how to incorporate a cooperative with all of its various partners and bylaws. We would like to have an accountant who understands how to do taxes for those types of companies, because I'm running up against that problem right now, because we've converted the Vermont Gauge Car Wash into a worker cooperative. Now it's an LLC or an LLP with 30 owners. How do you file taxes in that context, right? And this is part of that like very new learning that we have to do, so that we have a toolkit that we can offer people as they try to make this transition. We'd like to have somebody that can do the books and the payroll, right? I mean, I can do that. I do that right now, but we need more people trained in how to do it specifically for a cooperative context. that has money going back in for the buy-ins or that has money going out for the union dues. So that's what Lucy would like to become. Lucy's ambition is to bring in the lawyers, the accountants, the payroll professionals, the business professionals to service specifically cooperatives. Because before I came here today, I was at the Compton SBDC, and then earlier this week I was at another sort of like small business incubation stuff. And they're great. They offer a bunch of great resources, including loans, but only to small businesses that are in formulas that they understand, which is like the standard DBA, sole proprietorship, or small corporation. As soon as I start talking about worker cooperatives, you can see like their eyes go dead. Like they don't know what I'm talking about. They're interested, they would like to learn more, but that's just not the model that they understand, and they don't provide resources for it, either, functional resources or financial resources. So that's really up to communities like us to figure out how to bring in those lawyers and the accountants that we know of. I asked my accountant, I said, if we trained you in this, would you be willing to be the accountant for all the worker cooperatives that go forward? And he was just kind of like, yeah, sure, as long as it pays.
Yeah, well,
Which is fine, but we want
Yeah.
people that are committed in another way, that are committed for a reason.
a lot of firms have pro bono obligations that you can tap into. And then there are a bunch of these other folks who are committed, who do stuff for free anyway. And I'm thinking of ways to tap that. I mean, even the state bar may have some funds. And so I'm thinking that I don't know if we already have this, but if there's a way to get together a team with someone who can sort of do that sort of training and lay it out for people, I'm thinking legal because that's where my background is. That may be a way to start, to begin to train professionals who are interested in doing this stuff, maybe doing some pro bono work in it, on how to provide some resources for it.
And you were asking about how does the union play in with the cooperative, and in a lot of ways there is that, right? Resources. Like Americans have been paying union dues for how many decades? Unions have resources. They have lawyers, they have money, they have pensions, they have healthcare, they have disposable funds, right? The union is a big reason why the car wash was able to stay alive, right? Just in order to, like, they lent them someone there to work in the office, and it's that finding that solidarity network, right? I keep saying like, oh, I feel like I'm out here with nobody else. Well, the people that are out here are other people that are interested in democratic workplaces. Who are those people? Unions. Which is why Lucy is made up of a bunch of union reps, because those are the type of people that understand like what is possible when you're acting in concert and in solidarity and with purpose.
A couple of things before I completely lose my train of thought. I know two business owners, one in Indonesia, one in Minneapolis, who do, they're not co-ops, but they're concrete recycling businesses. So I wanted to encourage you, because you're doing something similar where you're taking a known material and recycling it. And they grew exponentially. So I know that when you're in it and you're sweating and it's hard and it's, you're the last one being paid, that there's, it's hard to feel hopeful, but I see your business growing just because of the nature of the business and the readily available resources that you have that are endless, actually. Also wanted to encourage you to offer deals to the existing clients whose use of those bumpers are going to need replacement and are going to dwindle down and need recycling in itself. So, hey, Mr. Tugboat, when your bumper is down to 0 and you need a new one, we'll give you whatever % off to get that old one back, so that we can take that worn down material and send it to become the material that goes to the playground. That we take that material that they're gonna chuck and make sure that it is completely recycled. And then, so you have a constant stream back and forth, so it's completely sustainable in terms of the circle being complete. And then, we're both business owners. I'm a strategist and a trainer and a mental health professional, so I'm happy to help with trainings if you ever need that,
I feel like I need all of those things.
And the language, and I live in Culver City, so I'm like right up against South Central. But the language in terms of trying to bring in more people, if you put in, very minimal advertising, just leaflets at churches or community centers or supermarkets that say, would you like to be part of a tribe? Have you ever worked in a community-centered job where the job has your back. When you start using familiar language, people can respond to it, and I think then it becomes easier, and it's not about an expectation of we're expecting this, but then word of mouth gets out, and there's a flow that starts to happen. So I just want to kind of give you that feedback and encouragement.
I appreciate both of those. I always need encouragement because I'm always like a little bit scared.
Yeah, I think, it sounds really exciting, but I think your concentration on your core is really, really important. It seems like that's going to be your blessing. If you have a core of employees and owners, co-op owners, that's just going to blossom. But if you aren't able to build that, I mean, it might take a while, but once that happens, it's like a drop of water. It's going to stand out. It sounds like a good deal. By the way, who's the person that does the carpet? You know what I'm talking about. The carpet.
Cradle to Cradle, William McDonough?
No, they're in North Carolina, I think. But it's time for them to move west. Like when we had our factory, our problem was shipping from the West Coast to the East Coast is twice as expensive.
Yeah.
So those are things that might happen, that the carpet manufacturer who manufactures carpets out of the recycled tires, they might be interested in coming here so that you could save that expense.
Yeah, I mean, that's how we started out with making the bumpers, is that I found this bumper like for sale on Uline's website, and I traced it back to like who manufactured it. I said, hey, you know, could I make this for you? And they said, oh, well, we're having them made in China.
Mm-hmm.
Bizarrely,
Mm-hmm.
waste tires were being shipped from the Port of Long Beach to Asia or India.
Yeah.
They were then being like punched into these pads, it's these rectangular pads with 2 bolt holes in them. And then they were being palletized and then loaded back into a sea container and shipped back to the Port of Long Beach, where I am. And then they were being put on a truck and trucked to Ohio, where then they were being assembled into these bumpers that were then being palletized and shipped to their buyers, who are as far away as like Sweden.
Crazy.
Crazy. Like talking about like carbon footprint that doesn't make any damn sense. So that was my first selling point to them. I was like, listen, I'm closer to you. I can create the same product for you. And you know, your orders can go out, you know, faster, and you can have more inventory control. One thing that's hard, of course, to compete on though is price. I mean, I had in my favor that they had shipping both ways, right? So that can go so that we can pay the guys. But I mean, still, it's like, it's a low margin business, right? Like we start guys off at minimum wage. Within the first year, they're going to like 11 or 12. Most of the guys that have been there for a while are like at 13, 14, 15. Like everybody knows in this room that it is damn near impossible to support yourself and potentially a family of 3 or 4 on those wages. And so that is also this like sort of fundamental block for the worker cooperative model, at least when it comes to RCO, because the worker cooperative model can work and be sustainable if the workers are making enough to live. And that includes me as a worker, right? If I'm not taking a salary, then our company isn't really viable yet. We need to be making enough money so that everybody is making a decent wage, and so am I, and that's the only way that we can continue to exist. Because otherwise we're just a charity, right? We're just running on charity. But it takes a while for companies to get there. All small businesses go through those first 2, 3, 4, 5 years of being unprofitable. I mean, and if freaking like Facebook and like Snapchat and all these other companies can be unprofitable even till now, like they're still unprofitable, and everybody's okay with that. Like everybody's okay with that conceptually, but that's not true for RCO, right? That we're no venture capitalists are just gonna like throw money at us so we can keep paying ourselves salaries even though we're not making a thing that doesn't make money. So incubating businesses in those early stages to the point that they actually are profitable enough that people are making enough, then they become sustainable, which is one of the reasons I think a lot of the worker cooperative movement is maybe not as focused on startups, because startups are really, really hard. So a slightly easier way to do this is to do conversions. And the city of LA is really into it, which is why they put money behind it, because they know that a lot of small business owners are retiring in LA right now. And they're saying, well, you know, these guys are gonna shut down their shops because their kids are off doing other jobs and they're not interested in like dad's, you know, mechanic shop or machine shop. And so the thing would be for the people that work there to get the resources to buy out the owners to keep the business open so the business doesn't disappear and their jobs stay there. So we're really focused on conversions. I'm still like knee deep in my startup, right? That's just the life that I chose for myself. I think both are worthwhile and viable. I think that starting up as a cooperative can be especially hard. You know, in my case, I started up not as a cooperative and now we're making the conversion.
I have two questions.
Oh,
and they're
yeah.
unrelated. Oh, yeah, sure, go for it.
Yeah, very good points. You bring up one very good point that it's very hard to make a living starting up here. That's from a purely monetary or financial standpoint. But when you think about the total cost, in other words, just like you mentioned, when there's a family crisis, even though you're making $11 or piddly $12 an hour, all the little incidentals that go unwritten, like the sort of knowing that somebody's got your back when a family member gets taken away, incarcerated, that you know, it's like you can't put a dollar figure. It's priceless, knowing that you're making you barely enough to scrounge a little bit here and live poorly, but no, you have the safety net there that in the family that you work with is priceless.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it, because
Yeah.
there's some times where there's some employees that don't have enough to eat or they're broke. We'll all come together and pitch in and make sure they have something to eat, or one employee will give them a loan till the next, whenever they can pay it and however they can pay it back, and that's how tight we are.
Whereas at a regular job, at minimum wage, doesn't have that.
Yeah.
And in the sense, like you mentioned, I think you were describing when one person, the machine operator was taken away and everybody gets together. I know I've been part of this at my corporation, and that's in Silicon Valley in technology. When everybody has their specialty, their different flavor, your little comfort zone where you're working, and you know, you don't step on people's toes, everybody has their task. There's a tendency when one role has been pulled away or stepped away that the vultures come in to, okay, I'm gonna learn and do that task, or even if nobody else wants to step up and is scared, I don't wanna do that role. There's a fear of whoever's gone out on sick leave or you know, stepped away, that it's going to be doubly hard for them because, oh God, I might not have the same job. You know, do you find there's a tendency for learning but not changing or replacing the work? In other words, the other people rally around to learn how to do the job that person had set the legacy for, but not changing it to where the person can come back and everything will be just as it was when they left. I find that's what I try to do when I work with people that step away. We fill in the hole, but not fill in the hole and change things just quickly, do something quickly, but try to work within the framework already been set up.
Yeah, how are they filling in for Michael?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, a few employees are very sad that he's gone.
That is leaving things to where he can come back and feel.
Well, we came together and we talked about it. We had a little short meeting about it on the floor, and we talked about, you know, who could do what, you know, who's available to learn this technology and this machine. Who wants to step up? I mean, when we first had the meeting, nobody wanted to do it. And then we kind of had to talk with each other and explain and see how serious it is, because if no one operates a machine, no one gets paid. So 2 people were down to sacrifice that time, and that they're down to learn that. Now, we all know that person that got taken away is going to come back, and we all know it's temporary, and we're looking out for that person and holding it down for that person until they come back. So it's like a family. So if like something happens to say you have a family and your dad gets sick or hurt, and everyone needs to step up just to cover for him until he gets better. It's something similar to that. It's like, and sometimes it's unspoken. It doesn't have to be explained too thoroughly. And so far, it's going great. I mean, there's some learning curves. They're messing up, and they're breaking stuff, but they're still optimistic about learning it and doing it for the company and doing it for everyone there and doing it for the person that's been taken away from our little work community.
And I didn't even know that happened, right? So like they intuitively like knew exactly what you're saying, right? Because I think I had said, me just being like a messy boss, they were like all standing there. I was like, okay, well somebody better step up or I'm gonna put on an ad out and we have to hire someone. And then everybody leaves my office. But they went out and they made a solution for themselves, right? Because they thought to themselves, they're like, oh, if she has to go hire a machinist to come in and replace Michael, what does that mean? Michael doesn't have a job when he gets back. So they did that on their own. I didn't give it a lot of thought. I was already on to the next problem, trying to like communicate with his wife and figure out, if we could post bail or something. And I wasn't thinking about it, but they went out and had exactly that intuitive conversation with themselves.
They were trained though.
What happened?
They did get trained on how to use the machine.
They're getting trained. The machine that they're getting trained on takes probably a few months to learn.
Okay.
But like they're advancing pretty
Yeah,
rapidly.
my last gig was at Cal OSHA, so I can do it on that. Go ahead.
I need an OSHA advisor. Please come join Lucy. We need those types of expertise.
I would think part of a co-op would be cross-training, so that everybody knows a little bit, so if someone does get sick or something happens, that somebody can pick up the slack and no one's,
Yeah,
you're
for
protected.
sure. And everybody has to be willing to do each other's job, because in a
Well,
lot
it's
of
part the deal.
contexts,
If you're
people
an
are like,
employee
I
there,
don't do that.
you accept that responsibility to be cross-trained.
Well,
Yeah, how do you avoid that? What happened in our factory was people protected their job and they didn't really want you to know what they did and they were proud of what they did, but they didn't want you to do it. How do you get around that?
I guess just communicating in a language that everybody understands as a whole, as a group. I did come across different people saying, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. But just kind of like,
That's where I get to step in and be a jerk.
just usually with those type of people, I usually pull them to the side and talk to them in their own language away from everyone else. And it helps show them the bigger picture of it all. And it usually works 99% of the time. And they have some have a lot of pride, some have a lot of big egos. But just giving them one-on-one communication in a language that they can interpret always helps. And after that conversation, they're ready. They're ready to suck it up and get to work and do it for the company.
So Bryan is the foreman, and I'm benefiting from the fact that Bryan's previous job sent him on some management training courses because he has this incredibly informed, gentle touch that is very communicative. But that's another problem, right, for all small businesses is management training. Management is a difficult role for anyone. You find a lot of petty tyrants. You give somebody a little bit of power and they like to lord it over their colleagues. And so it's another thing on my wish list for things that I would like Lucy or the cooperative movement in general to have is resources so that we can train people into management and management in sort of a consensus horizontal style, because we don't grow up like that. We don't live like that. We don't live in a society that promotes those values. So unless you're just amazing and you internalize it and then you manifest it, how else could you possibly know? So we need more training. I'm sorry that your wife just left because she probably would have been a great resource in that.
She's not my wife, she's my girlfriend.
You say that now.
Not yet. Actually, Andre, I'd love to talk, but you've been waiting, so.
Oh,
Can I
yeah.
talk after Andre? Can I ask you a couple questions?
I have hopefully two short questions, and one is about how the decisions are made on the floor. Is it consensus, or what kind of mechanisms used, or all decisions consensus, or are they just some, or what? And the other, I guess, is more technical about like cooperatives in Los Angeles, and you mentioned Cleveland and Cincinnati before, and maybe Rochester, like how in those cities you have anchor institutions which are helping cooperatives come about. So big, important public places that are fostering the development of service sector co-ops. Are there any institutions in LA besides the city that could have that role or that are having that role that we don't know of?
If you don't know, I don't know. So, I mean, and that's the great thing though about the stuff that you guys do here, right, is that Democracy at Work and the website and the network is this great resource, right? So I'm looking to you, I'm looking to your website, and you guys are looking to me, but it is, that's what cooperativism is about, I guess.
To answer your first question about how decisions are made on the floor, we do it mainly as a collective. Sometimes it can be challenging, it can be hard because there's some people with like real big egos,
Right.
and we don't have the management training yet. So I'll experiment sometimes. I'll leave certain people in charge and kind of watch them from a distance and see how they make decisions and how they interact with people and how they tell people what to do. And if they do make good decisions, I'll like tell them good job and reward them with that. But if they make bad decisions where it's like pissing and annoying other people off, then I'll pull them to the side and tell them like, look, I'll show them a certain perspective of what happened, where the other person sees it, what they're doing, which is wrong, and then 9 times out of 10 they understand it and they go about it different. And that's our own way of giving each other management training. And most decision making is done based upon kind of like a democratic voting system. So like we'll all come together and we'll ask who wants to do it, and a person will raise their hand. And if no one wants to raise their hand, someone always will raise their hand. So it's pretty smooth now.
I'm interested in how you, because it's not just like you're hiring somebody and get rid of them tomorrow. So when you bring somebody on, you're asking, you're welcoming him, he's part of family, he's family, right?
Yeah.
So how do you make those decisions? I mean, it completely like blows my mind, like hiring somebody is one thing, but then suddenly you're like, this is gonna be my brother, you know what I mean? It's a completely different deal. So could you talk about that a little bit? And could you also talk about like, what happens, like, you spoke a little bit about the crisis, but like if more hours need to be worked or something like that, like how you kind of deal with that as well?
Well, the hiring, so we got the hiring process pretty formalized in the union contract, which is something that I appreciate, right? Because I was talking about how, like, as an entrepreneur, you kind of feel like you're just winging it and you're making stuff up on your own. But actually, the union contract became a great, like, structure, like a basis, because it says in there, okay, the first, 90 days is probationary, which is like at will, so we can sort of like let that person go at any time for any reason, if it's not working out. After those 90 days, they then become members of the union, and then once they're members of the union, there has to be, a firing process, right? So if they're late once, they get a verbal warning. If they're late twice, they get a written warning. If they're late the third time, they get a suspension, right? And then so there's some things that are written out about, behavior and there's a few things that are like, zero tolerance, right? So if you're like, high or intoxicated at work, if you make any sort of like sexist, homophobic, racist comments, right? Those like immediately are escalated to the third stage. That's like an unpaid suspension right off the bat and then termination. So I actually really appreciated the contract negotiation process because we all sat down and we had talked about it with union reps. They brought in the original language. I made some changes, they made some changes, and then it's printed on a piece of paper and everybody signs it and everybody knows how things are going down, right? Because before it used to be a little bit arbitrary, right? If I would just take, even though I did try to ask the guys, like I do always go to the original crew, right? That core crew you're talking about, those like 10 to 11 guys that have been there for like 2, 3, 4 plus years. And say like, hey, how's this, how's the new girl working out? Is she keeping up? Is she keeping up with pace? Is she getting along with everyone? Is she respectful? Is she showing up on time? Is she taking direction and being cooperative? Stuff like that. And get feedback from them and then talk about, so is this somebody that we want to keep beyond those 90 days? Because we know once those 90 days are up, yes, they are now your union brother. They are, you're in bed with them, and it's a process to get rid of anyone that has to honor both their circumstances and the demands of work and production.
I mean, to me, it's beautiful because a new person comes in. We have a lot of like little short 30-second, 1-minute meetings on the floor. She might not know about them, but if a new person's coming, we give like introduction. The crew, we as a crew talk about it, and we talk about the importance of the new person coming to the family, and the importance of embracing this new person and showing them respect. And then when that new person comes, I talk to that person and I tell them, I introduce them to what they're coming into, and what we're about, what we represent. And then she comes onto the floor and everyone embraces that new person. They're patient with them, they help them in every way. And then I let them know like everyone is that person's teacher. And that person has free will to ask anyone for help. And it's so beautiful. I wish you could be there to see it, because the person comes in and everyone embraces them. If they have weaknesses, people try to strengthen that weakness. If they have any doubts or fears or whatever concerns, everyone comes to embrace that new person. As far as working long hours, we come together as a group again. Who wants to stay late? Who doesn't have to go pick up their kids? Who doesn't have to go to a second job or other obligations that are very important? We come together. Sometimes I would, if some work needs to get done, I would go pick up my kids and bring them back with me, put them on their iPads, which is not the most productive thing in the world, and then continue to work until the order is done. Just to sacrifice that for the whole of the family, the unit, and the collective, so we can all eat and still get paid.
That is such a beautiful thing. It's just.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always blown away by all of them and their commitment to it, because, you know, I also try to not be that crazy boss that's like, oh, we have to, you know, we're 2 days behind on this order, everybody has to work late, you know, 2 hours every day this week, because, you know, like at a certain point it's just crazy, like they're just bumpers. I have to tell myself. And yeah, and try to be understanding that people do have other obligations, you know, so we do it as a collective. We come together and we say, okay, we know this order was supposed to go out on Tuesday, you know, it's now Wednesday. To get it out by Friday, we're gonna have to work extra hours. Who can do it? You know, and usually there's a couple of people that say like, I can't, you know, and then there's a couple of people that say, sure, you know, I can do it, but only on this day and only till 7. And we just try to put together a schedule based on what everybody is able to do and make it work. And we haven't yet really had a moment where everybody was like, oh, to hell with this, we're leaving and we don't want to finish the order. Because of the transparency though, because they do know we have to get out so many orders of sidewalls every month, so many orders of bumpers every month. That's what pays the rent and pays the payroll.
It's more
Financial transparency is super important.
There's more to it than that, because a lot of the guys, most of the guys, they're not there. I mean, they're there for the money, but that's not their first concern. They really believe in what Niki is pushing and creating here, and she might not hear it all the time, but they really admire her and adore her, and they really believe in this. No, I'm being serious. They really believe. There's guys that work through toothaches and sprain fingers and sacrifice a whole lot physically, mentally, emotionally to make sure this dream, this idea, this new frontier comes into existence.
So I hate to be this guy, but we have like a minute for one very short question and one very short answer, and because we do have to be out of here at like 6:02 because there's a 7 o'clock event. So
A very short comment?
big question, comments, maybe save them for later as we're wrapping up. So
Okay.
If anyone has a question, that's like.
Is there any other like key question? I would just, I think I just wanted to second what Bryan said, because so Lucy, along with an organization called Collective Remake, Mary Sutton, you guys talked to her, so her workshops just started and I've been going to those. And the first day we sat down and we're like, okay, what are you guys' business ideas, you know? And one guy wanted to do like a worm and a fertilizer farm to make like organic fertilizer. One lady wanted to do a beauty salon. The other one wanted to do like mental health services or drug and addiction courses. Anyways, the thing that struck me that really stood out from that is that here you have people who, you know, spent maybe dozens of years in prison, right? Like sewing underwear and like other crazy stuff, and probably ended up in jail unjustly, right? Got served the worst that this society can serve, come out, have a really hard time working and paying their bills and getting ahead, and like they sit down and you ask them like what do they want to do, and the very first thing that comes out of their mouth is like, oh, I want to do something that's community based, I want to do something that gives back to my community. And I'm so impressed by them, because you think like, I think when we tend to sit back at a distance from sort of like an academic perspective, we say, oh, poor people's priorities are like, you know, making money and paying rent and getting food, and like those are their priorities, and they don't necessarily have time to worry about sort of the like loftier ideals. And as is always true, when rich people have ideas about what poor people think or need or want, they tend to be wrong. So it is exactly the opposite, which is that in fact, poor people are some of the people that want to do the most and give back the most. And so that's, yeah, like what Bryan was saying, is like we don't make a lot of money at RCO, but people believe in it, and I'm always so impressed looking at other people that want to start cooperatives, and they may have like nothing, but their goal is not to like make a bunch of money, their goal is to share it and build something beautiful.
I think those are good closing words. So thank you, Niki and Bryan. Thank you for coming.